Ever feel like your brain's just stuck on repeat? Thoughts whirling around, never really going anywhere.
It's like a hamster wheel sometimes.
Exactly. And it turns out there's a whole set of Buddhist teachings that are basically a guidebook for taming that monkey mind. We're diving deep on a sutra today, all about how to understand and gain control of your thoughts.
It's amazing, isn't it? These teachings are over 2,500 years old, but they're so relevant to the mental overload we experience today.
Totally. And what I find fascinating is that it's not about silencing your thoughts completely. It's more about choosing what you pay attention to, instead of getting yanked around by every notification and worry.
Exactly. And this particular sutra, it lays out 5 distinct techniques to do just that. Each one builds on the last, so you can kind of think of it like leveling up in a video game.
Okay, I love that analogy. So let's start with level 1. For someone who's just realizing, hey, my thoughts are kind of a chaotic mess, what's the first move?
So the first technique is all about mindful redirection. Imagine your mind is like a TV screen, right? And if a thought pops up that's disturbing, unhelpful, you don't sit there and stare at it. You consciously switch the channel to something more positive, more skillful.
So you're not pretending the thought doesn't exist, but you're choosing to focus on something else instead.
Exactly. Replacing a negative thought pattern with something more constructive. Like, let's say you're dwelling on a mistake you made at work. Instead, you might shift your focus to a recent success, something that makes you feel good.
So you're training your mind to gravitate towards the positive.
Precisely. It's about getting out of the darkness and into the light. But, and this is important, it takes practice.
Makes sense. But what about those thoughts that just won't quit?
Yeah.
You know, the ones you try to change the channel on, but they just keep coming back.
Yeah.
That's where we level up, right?
You got it. That takes us to the second technique, which is all about deep analysis. Instead of just distracting yourself, this time you shine a spotlight on that negative thought.
Okay, so we're getting a little more investigative now.
Exactly. You're asking yourself, what are the root causes of this thought? How is it actually impacting me?
So how does dissecting a thought actually help get rid of it?
Okay, picture this. Someone offers you this plate of delicious looking pastries. They look amazing, right? But then they tell you those pastries have been, I don't know, sprayed with something toxic. Suddenly, no matter how tempting they looked before, you don't want them anymore. Examining negative thoughts is like that. You're revealing their harmful nature, so you naturally start to avoid them.
So you're changing your relationship to the thought, not necessarily suppressing it.
That's a great way to put it. By repeatedly seeing the downsides of a thought, its hold on you starts to weaken. But, and you probably guessed this was coming, sometimes even that's not enough. Some thoughts, they're really persistent.
So what happens when levels 1 and 2 aren't cutting it? Time to bring out the heavy artillery.
Not quite yet. Level 3 might surprise you. It's about strategic ignoring.
Strategic ignoring. Doesn't that seem kind of, I don't know, passive? Shouldn't we be doing something with these thoughts, not just ignoring them?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but it's actually a very active form of mental training.
Okay, I'm listening.
All right, imagine you're at a busy coffee shop, right? You're trying to have a conversation, but there's music playing, people laughing, the espresso machine hissing, tons of distractions. Now, you can't just will those sounds away, can you?
Not really, no.
But you can choose to keep your attention on your friend's words, on the conversation you're having. That's kind of what strategic ignoring is like.
So it's less about pretending the thoughts aren't there and more about, choosing what deserves our attention.
Exactly. You got it. And this is where mindfulness comes in. The more aware we are of our thoughts, and I mean really aware, without judging them, the easier it becomes to choose which ones we engage with and which ones we just let float by.
That reminds me of something I read in the sutra. They use this analogy of slowing down a speeding car. You wouldn't just slam on the brakes at full speed, would you?
Perfect example. That's actually a great segue into level 4, which is all about gently decelerating the thought process. Instead of trying to stop our thoughts dead in their tracks, we're learning to gradually reduce their momentum.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued, but I gotta be honest, I'm a little skeptical too. How do you actually slow down your thinking?
Well, the sutra recommends using these introspective questions, or like speed bumps for your thoughts.
Speed bumps.
Yeah, like why am I rushing from thought to thought? Or what am I hoping to achieve by thinking this way? By pausing, even for a second, we create space in our minds for stillness and clarity.
So it's like hitting the pause button on a podcast, except it's our own internal monologue we're giving a break.
Exactly. And just like with a podcast, that pause gives us a chance to really absorb what we've just encountered and decide if it's worth our attention. But this sutra, it doesn't stop there. There's a fifth technique, and it's a bit of a doozy. It's often misunderstood, actually.
A doozy, huh? Sounds kind of intimidating. I'm ready for the boss level. So what is this fifth technique? The one that everyone gets wrong?
Well, the sutra describes it as, get this, squeeze, squash, and crush mind with mind.
Whoa, okay. That sounds intense, like some kind of mental wrestling match.
Yeah, you can see why it gets misinterpreted. But it's not about brute force, thankfully. It's more about, how do I explain this? Imagine clenching your jaw or pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth.
Okay, yeah, I can feel that.
It's that gentle tension. You're using physical sensations to create a counterforce against those really overwhelming thoughts.
So it's like a physical anchor when your mind is just racing.
Exactly. Now, this isn't something you'd use every day. It's more like that emergency brake we talked about earlier. If you've tried the other techniques and your mind is just spiraling with these really harmful, intrusive thoughts, this can be a way to kind of interrupt that pattern.
Makes me think of those breathing exercises people use during panic attacks, like something to bring you back to the present moment.
Absolutely. Same principle at work. And the sutra really emphasizes this. It's about self-compassion, not aggression. You're not trying to punish yourself. Just create a little space, a pause, so you can choose a more helpful way to respond.
So we've gone from thought swapping all the way to, well, mind crushing. That's quite a journey. But I got to ask, what's the end game here? What does it actually mean to master your thoughts, according to this Buddhist teaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's not about becoming some emotionless robot, It's not about never having a negative thought again. It's much more about cultivating a sense of inner peace, inner freedom. Imagine being able to choose your thoughts instead of feeling like they're choosing you.
Instead of being at the mercy of every notification, every worry that pops into your head.
Right. And that's a kind of freedom I think we're all searching for in this day and age.
For sure. But is it really possible, do you think, to have that level of control over our own minds?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And like most things worth exploring, the answer is probably more complicated than a simple yes or no. Maybe it's less about total control and more about skillful navigation.
So less like a dictator and more like a conductor of an orchestra. You're deciding which thoughts get your attention, which ones get to play their part, and which ones fade into the background.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we relate to our own thoughts. We can get swept away by them, totally lose ourselves, or we can learn to kind of ride the waves with more awareness, more intention.
And maybe, just maybe, those monkey mind thoughts aren't the enemy after all. Maybe they're just part of the symphony of being human. Definitely something to think about. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, may your thoughts be ever in your favor.